Good afternoon, ladies, gentlemen. It gives me great pleasure to welcome you to this session on second career. 2 days ago, I was in a session called Parallel Journeys, and I guess in a sense this is similar. Some of us were confused because we had more than two careers, but I think broadly what we're going to cover is writing and doing something else, and how these two sit together if they do, what are the advantages and conflicts, if any, constraints, and so on. I'll start by introducing one after the other, and with each introduction, I'll request the authors to read a small passage so that you get a sense of their writing as well. What's unique about this panel is that Nim is originally from Mumbai but based in Sydney. Janis is from Vancouver, and Hazel is from the UK but is writing based out of Paris. So these are different parts of the world. So I hope some of that flavor comes through in the writing. I am an author as well, and I'm happy to hear from the three others today, having said my piece 2 days ago. We'll start with Nim. Like I said, Nim is from Mumbai and is based out of Sydney, and her debut novel, Unraveling Anjali, Diary of an Immigrant Bride, is first, she says, of a planned trilogy. The plan is still on, yeah, okay. She has a day job in pharmaceutical sales. She has 3 kids, a Rhodesian ridgeback, and is fascinated by the digital age. Is that all right? Mic is all yours.
Thank you, Sanjay, for the very kind introduction, and thank you so much, everyone, for attending. Like Sanjay mentioned, this is my debut novel, Unraveling Anjali, and it's about an immigrant bride, so an Indian girl who leaves India in the late 1990s, goes to Australia and starts her married life there after an arranged marriage. So I've just picked a very short excerpt from the book, which actually highlights her interaction with a friend from the West who's not familiar with the whole concept of Indian arranged marriages, and just the little sort of interaction between them. So I'm just going to quickly read that to you. The coffee shop was noisy and crowded. Loud music belted out of an old-fashioned music system. We ordered our chai lattes and cakes. I settled for a blueberry muffin, and Daniela ordered a lemon cheesecake. As soon as our orders arrived, Daniela sipped her chai and then sat back, arms folded. So, tell me all about yourself, Anjali, she said. She wanted to know about where Ravi and I first met. In spite of her solemn demeanor, Daniela was a romantic at heart. Tell me everything. Start with how you both first fell in love with each other. I smiled. We didn't. She was taken aback. Didn't fall in love? What does that mean? I mean, we didn't fall in love when we first met. Ours is an arranged marriage. Daniela was curious. No one from her immediate circle of relatives and friends had ever had an arranged marriage. She knew these things existed, but wanted to know more. The concept confounded her. She couldn't get it into her head that a man and a woman would agree to tie the knot and spend a lifetime together when they knew nothing about each other. I explained that it was what we were conditioned to expect. But did you have a choice in the whole matter? Could you, for example, have said no if you didn't like the boy? Daniela had such a sweetly concerned look on her face that I was tempted to lean forward and give her a hug. I laughed. Yes, I did have a choice. She let out a huge sigh of relief, as though I had luckily escaped a miserable fate. Thank goodness. And how long did you know each other before you got married? 7 days. What? She screamed. You're kidding me, right? Oh no, I'm serious. I was giggling, not sure why it was such a preposterous thing to consider. You're crazy, said Daniela firmly. What a terrible gamble. How do you guys in India figure out if the couple is compatible? Imagine being stuck with someone whom you're not attracted to. What happens if you have different goals? I have never thought about arranged marriages in this light before.
That's nice. We move on to Janis. Janis is a singer-songwriter and she has a CD called Better This Way. Is it also available outside?
It is indeed.
It is, okay, there you go, yeah. And she's taught English in a Vancouver college. She's co-founded 2 periodicals. And currently she's an expressive arts therapist. Do you have a cure for addiction to buying art? Anyway, we'll come to that. Her first anthology of non-fiction was called Body Breakdown and it was published in 2007. And her recent anthology is Emails from India, Women Write Home, published in 2013. And which she calls her love letter to India.
Thank you, Sanjay. Thank you. So the CD titled Better This Way, I wrote the song when I was in Goa a few years ago in Palalum, and I debuted it in a beach bar restaurant in Palalum. And the refrain of the song in Better This Way is, I've been to India, I've been to Oregon, and I never thought I'd say that maybe it's better this way. So as Sanjay mentioned, this is an anthology. So it's a collection of writing from 27 writers, mainly from Canada, some from the US, some from the UK. And they're writing about their experiences traveling in India. There are 37 stories, so a few writers have more than one piece in it. I have 6 pieces. 5 of them are about traveling in India with my 16-year-old son, Adam. I took him here for 3 months in 2009. And one story is about traveling on my own. And I'd like to read to you just a couple of pages from that story. Its title is Shiva's Dance. When I'm traveling solo in a country like India, as I did last year, I become hyper-aware, which for me means that I can sometimes see through things to their quantum physics centers of nothing but energy. This can be disconcerting, but is as close as one can get, I think, to the ultimate reality, the real stuff, without needing to be enlightened. Gone are the comfy, safe structures of home and established routine. Gone are familiar faces and neighborhoods. Gone is the known culture, the social dynamics that uphold the values and expectations and etiquette that you've subscribed to in some degree or other for most of your life. It really is just you in the big world. And when you travel alone, that's how it is on every level. It's all you. When I travel by myself, the world ceases to be a solid environment that I can make my way in. Rather, it becomes a malleable dreamscape, constantly shifting and vibrating, reflecting my thoughts and beliefs, whether I'm consciously aware of them at the time or not, and whatever else. The environment is as much in me as I am in it. Boundaries are elusive. Everything is possible. This perspective seems especially appropriate in India, whose ancient spiritual wisdom reveals the physical world and all of its objects, draws, and drama as Maya, illusion, a veil hiding the ultimate reality. True travelers, those who put themselves out there, alone, vulnerable, and open to it all, experience magical things on the road. Coincidences and small world events occur regularly, and the unexplainable becomes more commonplace. Here's one small example. An Israeli man I met in a Goan guest house over a discussion of his book about Jung's archetypes would appear whenever I drew out of my journal a piece of paper that he'd written his email address on. The first time this happened, I hadn't seen him for weeks, having been on the road myself and just returned to Goa, and I was wondering if Daniel was still around. I noticed his email address when I was writing in my journal on the beach and decided to head to an internet place to email him. I took a few steps down the beach, and there he was. The next time it happened, I was in Hampi, Karnataka, a different state in South India, and had no idea Daniel would be going there too. I came across his name on that piece of paper while having breakfast in a rooftop restaurant, thought warmly of him, felt an opening in the air around me, walked down the stairs and out into the street, and there he was. He looked different this time, and I didn't recognize him at first. Shaved head with a little tail of hair, and dressed all in white, holy Hindu style. He approached me when I was talking with an Indian man, and just stood in front of us for a while, smiling broadly and waiting for me to recognize him. The last time I saw Daniel, my last day in India before my journey home, we were climbing down the rocky Hemakuta Hill in Hampi, from where we had just watched the sunset and drunk the small chai I bought from a little girl. And I heard Daniel softly singing John Denver's song, "Take Me Home, Country Roads." The temple where we were headed cast a long, intricate shadow on our path. The air was warm and smoky, and I was already feeling nostalgic for India. Daniel's choice of song moved me, especially when I realized it was in my honor, and I joined in. That song took us all the way to the temple, where we breathed incense and performed pujas in the dark. When I returned home to Vancouver after 7 weeks in India, on my first unsettled day back, I was unpacking my journal, and Daniel's piece of paper fell out. Moments later, I opened a cupboard drawer, and facing me was a book with the title Country Roads, a collection of photos of the Canadian countryside that I'd recently acquired and forgotten I'd stashed in that drawer. Suddenly, I was in India again, singing down a darkening hill.
Hazel, as I mentioned, was born in the United Kingdom, and she lives and writes in Paris. She has been a lecturer and a business leader in the education sector. The first novel was published in 2013, and it's called Kanya Kumari. And her second novel, Geranium Woman, is due out in 2015 and promises to be a psychological thriller. The search for authenticity seems to rule your life, from what I understand, and I think you hope the books help readers through some kind of an inner journey. All yours.
Thank you. Well, yes, my book, Kanya Kumari, as you can probably imagine from the title, is set in India. I wrote it over 3 separate trips to India. This is my 4th visit here. I'm fascinated by this country and can't seem to stay away. The story, Kanya Kumari, is about 3 women, 3 Western women, travelling through India, each alone. One of the characters is in the 1960s, and we learn about her journey through her letters home to her brother, her twin brother, Perel. The other 2 women have arrived together, but for certain reasons are now travelling alone. So what I hope the book does is a few things, really. It's very much a Western women's view of travelling in India, particularly alone. Some of the adventure, some of the concerns, some of the challenges, etc. But more than that, it's an exploration of feeling, firstly, perhaps alienated within a culture and a country that you don't fully understand, that you haven't experienced in such a way before, and also about how we find connection in a culture, in a country that can sometimes seem so very different. I'm very moved by the idea that what connects us as people, even though we may be very different people with different religions, different ways of life, different culture, society, etc., what connects us, I feel, is very much stronger and very much deeper than what divides us. And so what I hope with this novel is that as these 3 women travel alone through India, we travel with them. And so it's more than a physical journey, it's for them a psychological journey. each of the three women arrive in a very different place psychologically than where they began. And that's what I hope that my readers will take from this as well. So the piece I've chosen to read today, it's a short piece, and it's one of the letters that one of my characters, Sandrine, is writing home to her brother in France. So this is the 10th of April, 1968. Dearest Perel, you told me once, on a journey somewhere, I can't remember where, that you are unfinished. I was happy that you spoke to me like that, but I wondered if you thought you would ever be finished. I want to ask you this now, Perel. Are you a masterpiece in the making, a sculpture lurking in the wood? I told you then that I thought you were messy, and that I was too. Perel, I don't know if I'm fooling myself here. Here in the yogi's house, I tell myself stories of peace and rest and of independence, authenticity and freedom from attachments. And yet so often I think of you. It has been so long since I received word from you. A single word from you would elate me. And so I am not free. I have learned this here. But I have not learned what you tried to teach me. I can see that I don't yet want to leave you, but I am beginning to see that I must. When I was traveling, every time I arrived at a place, another town, a city, I would check the post office. Sometimes there was a letter from you, more often there wasn't. And so I remained shackled, tethered to you. I feel my weakness. I know it. I look at it full in the face. I have no questions for it, no answers. I think that as long as I remain here with the yogi, you will begin to recede, to transform. Perhaps there will be a freedom in that, as he says. You are already becoming a muse, no longer a man. Perhaps I thought that I could write you away with my letters, perhaps write myself into the space that you occupy. I will mail this letter, and if after 2 months I don't hear from you, it will be my last. I have realized that you were right when you told me that I love you means I want something from you. My love for you seems to demand a response from you. You told me that if you could change anything in your life, you would change our parents. Would you be finished then, Perel? Would I? We both ran away in our own different ways. We are alike, but I know we can't run together. I know this, but sometimes in the past, being with you has made me believe that I am free. If I were truly free, I would rip your address from my memory, burn it, throw the ashes into the wind to be carried far away from me. Maybe, Perel, but not yet. Write to me, my love. Give me your words. I will not write you again until you do. I am not yet free.
We could start with you, Hazel, and the reason I wanted to start with you is that I understand that you have now given up your other career and you've taken to writing full-time. So I think this is not something that happens very often in the writing world, so it's always nice to hear somebody who's attempting that. So can you give us some background on that and how you got the confidence to take this step?
Yes, thank you. You're absolutely right. It was a very big step to take. I was actually the CEO of an education company in the UK. We were a small company and we were providing to schools video conferenced courses to schools and colleges who couldn't otherwise provide subject specialist teachers. It was an interesting career. I enjoyed it very much. I got a lot from that. it was something that I'd done all my adult life. So I'd worked in the education industry and kind of worked my way up from being a teacher to heading, not just one, but two different companies, actually, over the years. It sounds like an ideal career. It sounds like, you know, that I kind of conventionally achieved a degree of success, and I did, and I'm very thankful for that, and I enjoyed it very much. But I think a number of things converged in my life to make me question what the next phase of my life would be. The first thing was that my daughter, she's 26 now, she obviously became independent. She graduated from university, she did her master's degree in history and politics, and she's now very firmly into her own career, so she's got her own life. So I faced the prospect of the kind of empty nest syndrome in a way. She's my only daughter, and once she had flown the nest, I really began to question what's important to me in my life. I had identified with being a mother very strongly, and although I still do, it's a very different experience being a mother of a full-grown young woman rather than a child. So after she'd left home, I really began to question what I wanted to do. I've always travelled a lot, but the second thing that affected me very deeply was I travelled, as I said before, in India very many times. I wrote this book in India, and I was very firmly convinced that you know, writing could be something perhaps more than a hobby. I'd always wanted to write, and I'd always found a way to build writing into my career. So when I was a teacher, I had textbooks published. When I was managing director, CEO, I was writing business articles for business-related magazines and so on. And I love the process. It's something that I find very creative. It's something that I find very fulfilling. And it was kind of growing within me, really. I didn't want it to be a hobby anymore. I wanted it to be more than that. And the third thing was, the second time I came to India, I actually met my now husband, who's here, a French man, and so we formed a relationship, and as that relationship began to grow and develop, I realized that it was going to end in marriage, which is nice. So there was a big, always nice. So there was a big decision for me to make there. Does he come to live in the UK with me? Do I go to live in Paris with him? And for the reasons that I've already outlined, where I was up to in my life, I was ready for a change. I was ready to take the plunge and have the next big challenge. I already had ideas of other novels that I wanted to write, so I took that plunge, and a year and a half ago I made the break, became a full-time writer and moved to Paris.
Janis, in terms of the choices that you've made so far, and lots of people feel that becoming a writer full-time is a bit of a risk, especially financial risk for people who are going to be dependent on it. And your career choices have been fairly risky. Expressive arts trainer, therapist. And these are not easy career choices. So, what's your background to that?
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So for 20 years off and on, I was a university and college level instructor in English departments and communication departments. I'm going to move to the other microphone. Yeah. Hello?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, so I wanted just to interject here that we're all mothers. And I appreciated what you said about your child having grown up. I think for Hazel and I, our children play a role in that. I know that you have younger ones. So I taught university college level English for a long time, and I'm also, as Sanjay mentioned, a singer-songwriter and an actor and a writer, and I've always written. And these creative pursuits have played intermittent roles in my life. Sometimes I would take a semester or two off teaching and be on the stage, act on the stage in a play or two, and other times I would rehearse with my music duo and we would perform. And occasionally I'd take a semester off and go to India. This is my fourth time here too, Hazel. Yeah. So I was doing all this and I loved teaching, but I felt when my son left home that things were changing in my life, and I'd reached a certain age, and I wanted to find a way to bring my creative pursuits more into the foreground in my life and have them play a more consistent role rather than this intermittent doing it when I can take the time kind of thing. So my son is 21 and going to business school of all things, and last year or the year before, I went back to school as I was teaching at college and studied to become an expressive arts therapist. So for those of you who don't know, an expressive arts therapist uses all of the arts modalities, uses writing and music and theater and visual art and dance and movement, all that stuff in creative, free-flowing, intermodal ways in a session. And the session is a therapeutic session of all kinds, psychological, dealing with psychological issues, emotional, even physical. So being a therapist is something that I'd always ventured into in different kinds of ways, being a mother, of course, and a teacher, and I think there's aspects of that in all of those career choices. But it was the creative interests and pull, and including writing and the music, that brought me into becoming an expressive arts therapist. Because in order to practice expressive arts therapy, you have to have your own creative practice going on all the time too. So it's a way of bringing all of my interests into the foreground, as well as practicing the therapy that goes with it. Thank you.
Nim, would you like to take off from what you said? And are you still with your pharmaceutical day job? And you also have a house full of people. How do you balance your writing with that?
Well, like we spoke about it earlier, I work in pharmaceutical sales, which as a career is as far removed as possible from that of a creative writer. So it was always a challenge, and coming back after a full day, talking to grumpy pharmacists all day, and then you come home and you take off your salesperson's hat and you wear your creative writer's hat. The kids always knew for the last 6 months they've got about half an hour in which they can ask me all the possible questions, except maths homework, which I left for Dad to deal with. That's not my cup of tea. And then I'd go into the room and start writing, and I'd sort of hear them in the background whispering to each other. Look, they're fighting with each other, so they'd be saying things like, "Mum's writing, can we go to another room and fight?" Instead of saying, "Mum's writing, let's not fight." It was something. So I could hear all those hushed whispers and my dog barking in the background. Even that was a bit subdued because somewhere I think he knew Mum's writing. So no, it was quite a challenge, but I have a very supportive husband who sort of said, "Look, go in and don't come out till you're ready to come out, and I'll look after everything else." So yeah, I think it's thanks to his help as well.
Is there an Australian story in you, Nim, sometime? Just like India seems to have influenced the two of them. Do you see that happening, or do you see the Indian narrative continuing with you in your trilogy?
The three protagonists for the three stories are all Indian, but there is a heavy Australian influence as well, because two of my key characters in this book are Australian as well. So definitely there's a blend of both cultures, and yeah, hopefully down the track there might be an Australian protagonist coming up as well.
This question is for any of you. How does whatever else you do influence your writing? Are there direct ways in which you can trace the influence in your writing, or are there less direct ways in which it influences your writing? Obviously, travel is a big element, and travel works on you in so many different ways, makes you what you are, I guess. But otherwise, in terms of your other careers, whatever you took up in your career, how has that influenced? I mean, two of you have taught, and so was that something which helped you a lot as well?
For me, teaching wasn't a direct influence. Travel has been a huge influence, certainly for this particular novel. But my former career, my former business career, has hugely influenced my second novel, The Geranium Woman, which is due out next year. That is about the trials and the tribulations and the excitement and the challenges of being a female CEO, even in the UK, where we like to think that we have a great deal of equality in all sorts of different ways. Women are far outnumbered by men at board level. It's a tiny percentage of women who actually head companies, and it's a very interesting position to be in. It's an interesting set of strategies to have to work out, to deal with. There's still a lot of discrimination and prejudice, some of it albeit very subtle rather than very obvious and overt. So that experience for me, whilst my second novel is not my story, it's a more generic story than that, but it's hugely influenced that. And I feel that that's an area in literature that is very underrepresented for the same reason that women on boards are underrepresented in a sense, because there are not many women who do have directorship level jobs. Therefore, I think there are not many books written about that. So I think that's a book that could have perhaps some appeal. It shows some light on what goes on in boardrooms generally as well, which I think is not something that many people often read about in a fictional context. So that aspect of my career for me has been quite a catalyst for my fictional creativity, I hope.
Janis?
I was teaching writing at university and college level, so I didn't really want to do much writing of my own during those periods. So being a writing instructor and communications instructor and then going home and trying to write, that didn't work. There's a hell of a lot of marking as well when you teach writing. So all of my energy was going into that. Hence I changed careers, and I can't tell you now the effects it will have because my therapist career is so new, but I'm hoping that there will be more writing involved there. I find what stimulates my own writing process, aside from carving out time, like I'm going to spend a few weeks in Goa writing, hopefully starting my next book. My first anthology was based on another life experiences. I had a major body breakdown, and when I was in the hospital and being a patient and vulnerable in a medical setting, confronting my mortality, I wished that I had other people's stories to read, and that would have helped me to feel less alone. So the body breakdowns book wasn't something I wanted to see in the world, and that's what stimulated that anthology. And it's the same with this anthology. When I was traveling alone, I really wished I could have heard about other women's experiences traveling in India. So for me, the kinds of work that I put into the world when it comes to books, in particular anthologies, this is what I'm talking about, is the kind of work that I myself personally needed.
Okay, you've been a great audience. Any questions that you have for the panel?
We've heard a little bit about Hazel's experiences in Janis, and then you went from India to Australia. Could would you like to tell us a little bit about your experience of living in Australia and how you felt as a woman and how your experience and how you were treated?
So I left India for Australia nearly 20 years ago. And when I was writing about Anjali and writing about the quintessential immigrant bride experience, I had to actually transport myself back 20 years to try and remember how it was to come to a country for the first time, to a new country for the first time. Australia has been a terrifically warm country. The people are a really, really warm set of people, and I've had only pleasant experiences in my 20 years there. A very open race of people who are open to new cultural experiences. Writing about Anjali, actually, I remember at the times that some of my early jobs were in telemarketing, where understanding the Aussie accent was always a challenge for me when I first went. So it was always, pardon, sorry, and that took up a lot of my conversation. So Anjali does a telemarketing job as well, and that's where she used to come home and complain to her husband, I can't understand the Aussie accent. And he told her, well, if you're only going to watch Bollywood movies all day, you're never going to understand the Aussie accent. So I would suggest you, maybe listen to radio, watch some Aussie programs, some True Blue, Crocodile Dundee kind of movies, and you'll get there. So 20 years later, I love the Aussie accent. I never have had to say pardon or sorry, or can you say that again? But really, I think it's all about assimilating in the country where you're living and learning a little bit about the culture you go to. So, yeah.
Just a question about your process of writing on the act of creation, we could say. Do you keep notes? Do you have a little diary where you jot down everyday happenings, which you will use in some book someday? Or do you just start out from memory, everything from scratch? What's the process of your writing?
Thanks. Yeah, that is a great question. I do a combination of both, really. With my stories, I usually start off with an idea or a kind of a theme, but I have no idea where that is going to go. I have no idea where the characters are going to take it, in a sense. And so I keep a notebook with me always. There's always a notebook in my bag. And exactly as you say, if I come across any interesting people or interesting situations or interesting places, I just make a little note of that. And I like to say, I've got a little phrase, I sometimes plagiarize my own writing. So I may be writing something that's completely unconnected with my novel, but it will find a home in the novel somehow, usually at some point, in either a piece of dialogue or a piece of description, something like that. But other than that, I don't keep notes of the actual happenings in the novel itself. Sometimes, the novel takes off in all sorts of directions, and I rely a lot on my memory to remember, who the characters are and what they're doing, etc. But the kind of notes that I make are, as you say, those kind of more observational notes that take place outside of me sitting down in front of my laptop.
Just wanted to add that I spent a lot of money buying really nice floral design notebooks, to write my beautiful notes in when the thoughts occur to me. Leave them in a really safe place, which is so safe I could never find the books when I want them. And inevitably, all the ideas come to me when I'm sitting in a restaurant, eating. And then that brilliant idea comes. So my handbag's filled with serviettes on which I've actually written bits and pieces. And my husband, when if he ever peeps in the bag, he says, "That is horrendous. What is that?" I said, "Well, that's literature happening there. So just let it stay."
Yeah, I think this is. Yeah, could you add? I think this is something that we all identify with. I too have, let's say, a similar habit. I buy lovely notebooks and I say, this is going to be for my poems, this is going to be for my short stories, and that's for my non-fiction. And then I end up with a whole collection of post-its and backs of envelopes and those kind of things, and then, you put it all together. So I don't think really writing doesn't work in an organized, engineering kind of way. And it's very chaotic and organic in its process. Yes. Do we have some questions? Yes.
Hi. you were saying you had come to India to write your book, and you wrote it in India. So where do you find the balance between staying in and putting pen to paper and actually producing work, and actually going out and cultivating experiences to actually inspire the work? And that would go for any of you too.
Yeah, that's another really good question. For me, when I come to India, or anywhere really, there is a balance between, especially in a new place, doing the whole tourist thing, seeing the sights, seeing what's famous in that place and all the rest of it. And then the other side for me of travel is just to experience the place, to experience the people, etc. And so 2 of the times I came to India, I was 1 month in the same place, basically. At one point I was in Madurai for a month in Tamil Nadu. I was working for a charity at that time. I was just doing a short charity stint writing articles for the magazine. And so I found time at that point to do some writing. It was an interesting experience because although I was in another country, although I was in another culture, it was still a going to work and coming home kind of experience. And for me, that gave a much deeper experience of what it is to be here. I was living with an Indian family at that time as well, and I think for me that was vital. I think if I just ran around from temple to temple and building to building, it wouldn't be experiencing India, it would be experiencing some beautiful buildings, which is very nice sometimes, but it's not the full story, it's not the full experience. And the 3rd time I came to India, I came again to spend a month in Kerala to basically finish the book. The book needed to come back, so I brought the book back, and for me, staying in one place really helped to create that balance. And then there's travel around that as well, which gives another dimension.
Yeah, just briefly to add to that, in total agreement there. I can't imagine writing and actually moving around and traveling. I'd have to be in one place, and I'm hoping that works for me here.
Actually, more a comment, and it's to your question, because I find I'm in a similar situation to you. I'm here in Goa for 4 months in order to write, and similar to what Hazel said is staying one place. But what I'm finding I'm needing to do is what I would do at home, which is set business hours, essentially. So up till a certain time, I'm doing my Indian things. Then I'm sitting in front of the computer for a number of hours, as much as I would at home. And then in the evening, for escape and relief from the computer, then meet friends or go for dinner. So that's just one thought.